we just wanted to talk about the protesters gathering outside of Justice Alito's house and Justice Kavanaugh's house. You may have heard about this in the news. People are talking about this. Jen Psaki tweeted out that while, the White House respects the right to protest, people should lay off protesting outside justices' houses. So I'm just going to actually play a very, very brief bit of video here just to catch everybody up on what these protests look like.
We will not go back. We will not go back. We will not go back. We will not go back.
So this is outside Kavanaugh's house.
We will not go back. We will not go back.
All right, you pretty much get it. It's a pretty shitty house for a Supreme Court justice, I have to say.
They just don't get enough of the kind of information you can inside trade on.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly. There's just right. They're too cut off from the rest of the system, which is actually, oddly enough, their purpose. Right now, here's the thing: we had the Washington Post editorial board write an op-ed saying the same thing that Psaki said. We disagree with the court's decision too, but we shouldn't protest outside justices' homes. Now, I'm going to give my brief take on this, Russell, and then I will toss to you. I agree that in a functioning American system, it would be inappropriate to do this precisely because the judiciary was designed as the branch of government that was supposed to be unaccountable to the public in the sense that it is not meant to be pressured by public sentiment. That's their whole point. They are the check on the legislative branch and the executive branch. Both the legislators and the executives are, of course, very responsive to public sentiment. It's their job to be responsive to public sentiment. The role of the court is the exact opposite. The role of the court is to be the neutral referee that is not influenced by any of that noise and is only there to interpret the laws that are passed and decide whether those laws are constitutional or not. That is their function. And so if everything were working great, if everything were going great in this country and the system were functioning just fine, I would say, yeah, it's inappropriate to go and berate judges outside of their homes. However, that is not the system we are living in. That is not the country we are living in. And I don't understand the level of cognitive dissonance you have to be able to say, on one hand, we are being dragged into a fascistic, theocratic, authoritarian, Handmaid's Tale dystopia, and on the other hand, protesting outside the homes of those dragging us there is just uncalled for and over the line. I don't know how you square those two things. I don't know how you can possibly think both of those things. And the point that you made, Russell, in our last live stream is that many on the right, not necessarily at the rank and file level, like the people, but right-wing leaders right now and right-wing thinkers are already looking to how they are going. What's that?
The right-wing intellectuals.
The right-wing intellectuals, right. They are already thinking of how to build power and wield power in a post-democratic system. And the liberals and everybody on the left side of the aisle, frankly, is thinking, how do we salvage this democratic system? And so what you have are two sides operating on completely different levels, right? The right-wing leadership doesn't give a fuck about any of these norms or guardrails or, founding ideas. They're about power, power, power. That's why in the days after this SCOTUS opinion leaked, you had Mitch McConnell come out and say, yeah, maybe we'll talk about a federal abortion ban. You had senators, congresspeople talking about banning birth control, banning condoms, right? How are you going to beat these people if you are too polite to protest outside of a justice's house? Who is going to win this fight? A right wing that just pounces on every single opportunity it sees. It sees an inch with the Roe v. Wade ruling. It takes a mile. Oh, yeah, we're going after condoms now. No condoms in the U.S. anymore, right? How are you going to beat them? How do you possibly plan on beating them? If your intellectuals, your thought leaders are publishing op-eds in the Washington Post. Say, yeah, no, we disagree with the ruling, but it's really inappropriate to protest on their streets. Who's going to win this fight? I think it's not even close. You have no chance at beating these people with this fucking attitude, in my opinion. And so that's where I come down. Yeah, under normal circumstances, it would be wrong to show up outside their houses. But if you really believe, as I do, that this is a 5-alarm fire going off in our own house, I think you have to be willing to take those kinds of actions. Not condoning violence, by the way. If you notice, those were peaceful protests. So I just want to say that. That's where I come down.
Wow, I'm really going to have to walk a very delicate line here because we're live streaming. The American Revolution was not a peaceful protest. That's as far as I'm going to go in that direction. I'm just going to mention that. Yes, the right, from the information that I have, I'm not deeply ensconced in it, they are thinking to the system that replaces this one. They've already given up on this system. They've already decided this system is over. What they want to replace it with is what makes them right-wingers. They're talking about monarchy, which I've thought of some of them, not all of them. It's a fractious group. They have different ideas about where you go from here. But I gave this more thought because that really took me aback, because on the one hand, you're not very often exposed in our corners of the world to right-wing intellectuals. We're only exposed to, MAGA, right? We're not often exposed to that. So they have a much more cogent, coherent analysis of our system and its collapse than the main thinkers on the left do. I mean, accepted people like Chris Hedges, they've got it. But that's what's interesting. You have people on the right who, when they analyze what's going on in our system, they sound like Chris Hedges. Like they have the same kind of understanding that this is done. This just isn't working. Now, the monarchy thing, that some of them would even be thinking about monarchy, that surprised me at first, because they had such an intelligent analysis of society. Then I was surprised. Well, why would you think monarchy would work? I suppose that makes sense if you are very concerned about traditional mores, about enforcing traditional values and having a way of doing that. If that's something that really concerns you, the idea of having some kind of figurehead nuclear family that imposes these kinds of values on the whole of society might be what you would come up with. That's the nearest I can figure. I don't get where the monarchy comes from, except perhaps they might feel that it would allow for an enforcement of a certain cultural unity and a certain cultural conservatism. But all that to say, they don't have any fucking answers, but they know what war they're in, and the left does not. They don't understand what fight they're in. They're fighting boxing in a ultimate fighting championship. Like they don't get what this fight is.
Right. They don't understand it's okay to pull hair and bite.
Yeah, they don't get it.
Right. They don't understand that. They just can't grasp that.
That having been said, I mean, yeah, once you start showing up at judges' houses and doing this, sure, does it chip away at the system? Of course it does. Of course it does. We do it, they're going to do it, and it's just that seems to be what's happening in a lot of areas now.
Yeah, and this is what we've talked about all the time when we talk about the collapse of this system. And, what you talked about in the last show was that, the right is just so much more hip to that. Whereas the left seems very desperate to sort of hold on to what is left of the American democratic project. And the right is already thinking, well, okay, this thing is on its way out. You know, in the David Mamet interview that he gave to Joe Rogan, it was actually very interesting. I mean, I think Mamet is a bit of a whack job now with his politics, but Russell and I are both theater people. It's impossible to be a theater person and not have a special place in your heart for Mamet. I mean, he's one of the great contemporary writers there is, and undoubtedly a very smart guy, even if he has gone a bit crazy. And he said in that interview, it was really interesting to hear a right-wing thinker just admit outright that the country is sort of dying. And he said, yeah, I agree the country is dying. He says everything organic dies. All organic matter is born, it thrives for a bit, it matures, and then it dies. And we are probably in our dying phase. And it's interesting that you mentioned, Russell, this emphasis on the nuclear family, this emphasis on a return to God. He put it as a return to the individual, right? If the society is dying, then how should we handle that? Do we handle that by trying to save it, or do we handle that by emphasizing the role of the individual and the nuclear family, right? Because out of that, maybe something else will grow to replace it. I'm in no way endorsing that point of view. I'm obviously a leftist. I think we need Medicare for all. I think we need to collectivize things, right? But it's interesting to hear a right-wing thinker sort of put things that way, because you would never, because see, what's really interesting about that is that the rhetoric out of Trump himself, the man, is very jingoistic. It's very rah, rah, rah. Nothing's ever been, we had the best economy ever. The country was better than ever under me. That's his bravado. But the underlying ethos of the Trump movement is actually the complete opposite. The underlying ethos is that everything is going to hell. And there's a sort of death drive fueling that. And part of that death drive means sort of renewed emphasis on the individual, right? What does an animal do before it dies? It finds a place to be by itself, right? It finds a place to go and be alone and be unbothered so that it can die in peace. And I think that is sort of what we're seeing on the right. We're seeing that sort of instinct manifest itself in all of this, what I consider pretty crazy political stuff.
Please clap.